Where are things going to end in the Ukraine war? I'll talk about that. Looks like Putin's endgame here is a little different than what we're hearing about from the Western media. I want to expose why the left's campaign against the Trump lawyers is a gross violation of the rule of law. GOP candidate Myra Flores, who's running in the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas, she's going to join me and Debbie. We're both going to talk to her about flipping the Rio Grande Valley red. I'm going to review a study showing how people with deceitful and Machiavellian personalities cash in on the bogus claims of victimhood. And we're going to continue our journey through Dante's Purgatory now by going through the purgatorial gate. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
The foreign policy debate in America, which has never been of a really high quality, even in the era of the Cold War. A lot of things that were said routinely, sometimes by Republicans as much as by Democrats, about the Soviet Union were just flat out wrong or were not borne out by events. I think the situation has gotten even worse, and especially now with the Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So one of the themes I'm picking up in the media, this is in the mainstream media, is Russia has lost. Or if Russia hasn't lost, Russia is losing. And Russia is going to have to be content with occupying certain parts in the south and the east of Ukraine because they're just not going to get the Ukraine. They're not going to be able to rule the place. And even the territory that the Russians are able to occupy, and even if Ukraine can't get those places back, Russia is going to have its own Afghanistan in the Ukraine. This kind of Afghanization, you may say, of the Ukraine is where Putin is going to have his most bitter tears. Now, this whole analysis is based on certain assumptions. One, Putin's goal is to conquer all of Ukraine. Number two, Putin wants to occupy and rule the Ukraine, and therefore his, quote, inability to do that shows that his objectives have failed. He wants to reduce Ukraine to a satellite state, and that's clearly not going to happen. And number four, that he intends a kind of Afghan-style long-term occupation, and that's going to turn and haunt him over time as the Ukrainians conduct kind of guerrilla operations. Now, what if it is the case that none of these are Putin's objectives at all? What if it is the case that Putin's objectives are kind of what he said? Now, Putin may well be a gangster. I'm not saying that we should take at face value, believe automatically what he says, but we should at least listen to it because in some cases what gangsters say are in fact what they mean. They say, give me the money and I won't shoot you, and that's what they do mean. Now, sometimes they may take the money and shoot you anyway, but it could be that they just want the money. Now, what does Putin want in Ukraine? He wants a subdued Ukraine. He wants certain parts of Ukraine, which are, in fact, heavily populated with Russians and people who are pro-Russian, pro-Putin. And he wants Ukraine to give up its kind of aspiration to be part of a Western military alliance, and particularly to be part of NATO. Now, you'll notice that Putin and Putin's men and Zelensky's men have been meeting. There are constant back and forths going on, and there hasn't really been any breakthrough. There hasn't really been any progress, and you might ask why that is the case. I think the reason it is the case is that both sides are looking for a military success that then makes their negotiating position even stronger. This really reminds us that politics and war sometimes go hand in hand, and that diplomatic objectives are achieved once military objectives and goals are secured. The Russians already now they've penetrated deep into Ukraine. They are occupying territories in the south and in the east. But I'm not sure if it's Putin's goal to stay there. It could be that he wants to have a regime in Ukraine generally, but specifically in those territories, that is friendly to Russia, that's pro-Russian. And let's think about the degree to which he's already achieved those objectives. Even Zelensky has in effect said, we're not going to expend all our blood and treasure trying to get those territories back. So de facto, it seems that Ukraine has now come to accept that some of that territory is going to be, if not under direct Russian rule, then under, you may say, Russian supervision, or at least under strong Russian influence. Number two, if you notice and listen to Zelensky carefully, his rhetoric remains very martial, which is, I want more tanks, I want this, I want that. But I think he's actually come to realize that none of the Western countries, none, not Europe, not America, not Australia, not Canada, are willing to commit their own troops. And this means that Ukraine has no way really to win here. Winning for them really means making the Russians kind of ultimately stop these hostilities, and evidently Zelensky's willing to give ground in that. If you listen to him, as I say carefully, he goes, number one, he goes, we're going to let some of the territorial captures stay where they are. And in other words, he's not conceding that the Russians in principle have a right to them, but what he's saying is there's not much we can do about it. He's accepting, you could call it practical necessity. But number two, and even more critical, he says, well, it may well be that we're not going to be joining NATO after all. And this really, what's so almost tragic to hear this now is that this was the reason that the hostilities began in the first place. Putin was always clear that the reason that he was so determined to bring Ukraine to heel was the Ukrainians had gotten into their idea, by the way, an idea planted by America and the West. Hey, God, you know what, Ukraine, you can join NATO, no problem. We're going to make you part of our alliance. We're going to show the Russian bear. And now Zelensky is essentially saying, nah, it doesn't look like this is going to happen. By the way, Ukraine was never admitted into NATO, but there were some sort of winks and pledges that were made that gave Ukraine the idea that they would be, you could almost call it a de facto or a sort of honorary member of NATO, even though not officially in the NATO alliance. So where is this going to end? I think it's going to end with Putin basically deciding that his objectives have largely been achieved, and that he's going to have friendly local governments in the south and in the east that essentially get on Zoom calls with the Russians to what should we do to help you guys out. He's going to have a tamed Zelensky and a tamed Ukrainian leadership that realizes that belonging to NATO now is, and in fact always was, a pipe dream. Mike Lindell, the inventor and CEO of MyPillow, wants to make it easy for you to be a super shopper like Debbie and me. How? By giving you great deals. For example, his Giza Dream bed sheets are now 60% off, as low as $39.99. Plus, with any purchase using promo code Dinesh, you're going to get a free copy of Mike's inspirational book. He's also offering up to 66% off his other products, and it's a cornucopia of great products. All the MyPillow products come with a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 10-year warranty. Call 800-876-0227. That number again, 800-876-0227, or go to mypillow.com. But to get these discounts, you got to use promo code DINESH, Dinesh. The Prussian general Clausewitz famously said that war is a continuation of politics or policy by other means. What I want to talk about is the scorched earth campaign by the left against the Trump lawyers. This is something that is known as Project 65. It's aimed at going after the Trump lawyers who supposedly assisted Trump in challenging the election results. And what this is it's kind of the opposite of what Clausewitz was saying. He said war is policy by other means, but this is turning politics into all-out warfare. It's essentially treating the legal profession, which has always taken the view that, listen, people do have the right to a lawyer. A lawyer is an advocate. A lawyer should not be confused necessarily with the cause of the client. The client wants you to defend, hey, listen, I've been accused of burglary. I want you to defend me. That doesn't make the lawyer into a burglar. Hey, I want to challenge the election results. I want you to represent me. The lawyer is an advocate. That's the lawyer's role. And that's the legal system. That's the rule of law in this country. So going after Trump lawyers for arguing on behalf of their client, this is a gross violation of a basic principle. This is going beyond the politics of left and right. This is essentially saying we don't even want rule of law in this country. We want to penalize the lawyers for the cases that they've identified with. And this is a project that's being led by this sleazy David Brock, who actually is very explicit about its goals. He basically says, we're trying to shame these people. And by the way, if they belong to big firms, we probably can't get them. But he goes, if they belong to small firms, we can ruin their life. We can ruin their reputation. Quote, I think the little fish are probably more vulnerable to what we're doing. You're threatening their livelihoods, and you know they've got reputations in their community. So think of the shamelessness of this character, David Brock. By the way, a guy I knew before he pivoted left, largely on the basis of his nocturnal pursuits. Now, Alan Dershowitz is outraged by what the Project 65 is doing, and he says he's actually going to use his legal influence and potentially his own representation to support these lawyers, because I think he recognizes the principle at stake. I want to quote from Dershowitz. He goes, it was 22 years ago when lawyers like me sought to block the election of President George Bush, believing as we did that Al Gore actually received more votes than Bush in Florida and was the rightful winner. He goes, we lost in court, but back then no one suggested going after the hundreds of lawyers who tried to prevent Bush's certification. He goes, this is a dangerous weapon, like the 65 Project unleashed by Democrats, will surely be used by Republicans at some future time. Let's remember, Democrats are regularly denouncing election results. Stacey Abrams denounced the election result of the gubernatorial election that she lost in Georgia. Hillary Clinton denounced the results of the 2016 election. Here's Dershowitz referring back to what happened in 2000 with Bush v. Gore. So I think it's right. And Dershowitz is right, that this is a dangerous precedent to set. Now, I do think that Republicans need to make good on this in showing the Democrats that, listen, if you do this kind of stuff, we're going to be doing exactly the same thing. This is a point I've made before in the podcast. It's Republicans teaching the Democrats a lesson, not because we want this politics of Clausewitzian warfare to continue, but because we want the bully to get off the playground. We want the bully to realize that, listen, bully though you may be, you're not going to be able to always get away with it, because if you stamp on our feet, 10 of us will get together and stamp on your feet. So this is a way of leveling the playing field and restoring, in this case, something very central to our society, which is the basic sanctity of the rule of law. When's the last time you looked at your mortgage? I mean, really looked at what you're spending. If it's been a while, you could be overpaying and not even know it. Don't let that happen. Interest rates are still incredibly low, which could mean hundreds of dollars in monthly savings for you. Do yourself a favor and make a 10-minute call to American Financing. Take advantage of a free mortgage review and see if they can save you up to $1,000 a month. That's right, a month. No pressure, no obligation, no upfront or hidden fees. Just a simple conversation around custom loans that may fit your budget better. And if you start now, you could close in as quick as 10 days. Call 888-528-1219. That number again, 888-528-1219, or visit AmericanFinancing.net. American Financing, NMLS 182334, NMLSConsumerAccess.org. Guys, I'm really delighted to welcome to the podcast Myra Flores. She is a U.S. citizen born in Mexico. She came legally to the United States at the age of 6. She became a naturalized U.S. citizen. She's a respiratory care practitioner who works caring for the elderly and the disabled and has been on the front lines helping people to fight against COVID. She's lived in the Rio Grande Valley. This is the south part of Texas, right near the border, since 2004. She's now running for Congress in South Texas, District 34. Myra, welcome to the podcast. Really looking forward to this. You're in a district that's of a lot of interest to Debbie and me. Debbie, in fact, grew up in the Rio Grande Valley in Harlingen, Texas. Awesome. And I'm going to sort of deploy her in the second segment to talk to you a little bit about things you might have in common and about your story. So I want to focus in on a few kind of key issues that you're running on. Maybe I can begin by asking you about this kind of sea change that seems to be underway, in which Hispanics, Latinos, Latinas are realizing that their kind of traditional allegiance to the Democratic Party is now kind of out of sync. The Democratic Party today doesn't stand for what you can maybe call Hispanic values. So can you begin by saying a word about that?
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to start by saying I grew up here in South Texas. I actually graduated from high school in 2004 in San Benito, but I grew up here in this area. And I've always said the Hispanic community is very conservative. Our values are pro-God, pro-life, pro-family, all about hard work. Our values align with the Republican Party, but we have been lied to. We have been told that the Republican Party is the party of the rich, that it's the party that only white people support. And that's the idea I grew up thinking. And I still remember asking my father, who should I vote for? And he told me Barack Obama. He said, you should vote for him. And I did not question him why I should vote or not vote for him. I voted for him because that's what I was told to do so. But a family member of mine came up to me and said, Myra, do you know exactly what you're voting for? And I said, to be honest with you, I don't. So when she explained to me the platforms, I told her, I'm a Republican. And, that's when I realized the lack of information. So I actually started educating my family. I started telling them what the platforms were. By the way, my dad hated it because I was able to convince most of my family, to vote Republican. And it's something that I was very proud of. So I actually decided to get involved at the local level because I realized that if I was able to convince my family, what if I'm able to convince my community? What if I start knocking doors, making phone calls, making events? So I reached out to the local GOP in Hidalgo, and I became the Hispanic outreach chair for 4 or 5 years and dedicated myself to the community and making sure that they knew exactly what they were voting for. That was, for me, the priority. I wanted them to know exactly what they were voting for. And when I would give them the information, they would realize that they did not support the Democrat Party's platform.
Myra, normally the Democrats, they appeal to minorities, loosely speaking, on two bases. One is we have all kinds of benefits that we're going to give you if you vote for us. So this is a kind of, broadly speaking, a vote buying scheme, but it's we offer you these entitlements and you can count on them and we are the people to deliver them. And the second one is the race card. And as you mentioned the notion of only white people are Republicans, but the idea is that persons of color like you or even like me were victims in this society. We should develop a victim mentality. We should see white supremacy as the problem. It seems like you have sort of been liberated from all this nonsense, but talk a little bit about how, because it's obviously tempting enough that other people are suckered into it. How is it that you're able to sort of see through the fog and realize these people are selling us some false snake oil here that we need to be able to see through?
Right. Well, for me, my values are very important. And I've always believed that, no political party is worth us putting our values aside. So I can only speak for myself. When I saw that my values align with the Republican Party, it was no question for me, like, oh, I'm going to vote this way because these are my values. Now, this area, this community, yeah, you're right. The Democrats have always made those type of promises, but I believe that they want to keep us poor. They want to keep us poor and educated so they can continue controlling our vote. They always make the same promises about immigration. They use that issue because they understand that it's important to us. So they're always using the immigration issue, but yet they're not solving the solution, and they're never going to solve the solution because they will have nothing else to use to obtain our vote. So they're never going to, solve this issue with the immigration problems that we currently have in the United States. Is just, I don't know. Everything I see on the Democrat Party is just standing against everything we stand for in South Texas. And people tell me, how can you, vote Republican if you're from Mexico? Well, it's obvious that they do not understand our culture, but our culture, again, is very conservative. And the Democrat Party just doesn't share absolutely nothing with us.
When you mentioned a moment ago, Myra, hard work, I think what you were talking about is that what most immigrants aspire to is bettering their own life and bettering the lives of their children. So in other words, this is typically called upward mobility. You move up in life, you move from a shack to a smaller house to then a little bigger house, and then you have a yard, and then if you make it, you have a pool. This is the American dream, and it seems that what you're saying is, I believe in the American dream. I don't believe in this idea of being a perpetual victim.
Absolutely. I am the American dream. You know, I came here to the United States when I was 6 years old. I worked in the cotton fields at 13 years old, instilling in me the value of hard work, allowing me to get an education, became a respiratory care practitioner. If that is not the American dream, what is? And I just want to make sure that our children are able to obtain the American dream just like I have achieved it. And I do believe that we should not allow the left to jeopardize the American dream. And that's exactly what they're doing.
Myra, it's been a real pleasure chatting with you. We're going to take a break, but when we come back, I'm going to do a handoff to Debbie. She'll be sitting in this seat, and she'll chat with you in the second segment. But I do want to let you know we want to do everything we can to help you to get over the finish line. You're a great candidate, and it's about time that we turn that seat red. So we'll be right back.
Thank you so much. God bless.
Who likes to eat 6 servings of fruits and veggies every single day? Well, who can realistically do that? Now, Balance of Nature provides that, and their products are 100% natural. They're vine-ripened, whole food, and third-party tested. This is real science, real food, and real nutrition. Debbie and I take 10 daily servings of fruits and veggies, and we do it all in 6 small capsules. We take 3 of the fruits right here, 3 of the veggies right here. They're no trouble swallowing. They're always fresh. Nothing artificial. They smell great. Balance of Nature keeps all the natural chemistry, the seeds, the skin, the core, the color in their produce. They only remove the water and the air. And Debbie also swears by this. It's the fiber and spice, and she says it keeps her regular. So join me and experience the Balance of Nature difference for yourself for years to come. For a limited time, all new preferred customers get an additional 35% discount and free shipping on your first Balance of Nature order. Use discount code BALANCE. Call 800-246-8751. That's 800-246-8751, or go to balanceofnature.com and use discount code BALANCE.
Hi, everyone. We are thrilled to have with us Mayra Flores. She is a congressional candidate in the Rio Grande Valley, Texas Congressional District 34. And my hubby just finished interviewing her in the first segment, and I'm continuing it. The first thing I want to say, Mayra, is that my mother proudly voted for you in the primary. She loves you. So just so you know, you have a big fan down there. As you know, Dinesh told you that I grew up in the Rio Grande Valley, graduated from Harlingen High School in 1984. So many, many years before you graduated from San Benito, who was our rival. I'm so sorry about that. No, that's okay. I won't hold that against you. It's good. It's all good. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about was a little bit more personal. I hear that your hubby is a Border Patrol agent. And so I know it's got to be particularly tough for you to see what the Border Patrol agents are going through under this administration. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. For me, it's very personal, right? I just want to make sure that he comes home safe. You know, I've never seen anything like this. I've never heard our Border Patrol agents getting shot at. So absolutely, it's now my biggest concern. And now with Title 42 ending, I know that our Border Patrol agents are practically going to get run over. We're expecting about 18,000 illegal immigrants coming into our border a day. 18,000. We don't have the manpower. But you're right. It is a big concern of mine. And like I tell him, I just want you to come home safe. At the end of the day, you do have a family, and think of us and, through the day, and make sure that, that you make the right decisions, and that those decisions bring you back home.
Yeah, great. Well, it's always very special to me when I go to the Valley. I try to go as often as I can, though I don't go very often to visit my mama. But every time I go through the border security area, I always thank them for their service because I know it's tough. I know that it's a thankless job, especially now. So hats off to you and your hubby for the work he
Thank
does.
you. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about what you're going through right now with a special election. I hear in your district. What's going on with that?
Well, Filemon Vela, our congressman, decided to resign in the middle of a border crisis. Decided to resign in the middle of a crisis with our economy as well, and it's just, a disgrace because the people of Texas District 34 have trusted and have given them their trust, but in reality, we have been abandoned for a long time. He really hasn't been present. So I want to show this district what real leadership looks like. Me wanting to put the families of District 34 first should not be political. We are fed up here in South Texas. We truly are. We're fed up of the corruption, of the compadre system in this area. And if we want real change, we have to vote for the person that is going to look after the interest of the well-being of the community of this district. And what's happening at the border is just insane. I mean, clearly the Biden administration doesn't care about the safety of the American people or the safety of the children coming in through our borders as well. The cartel has taken over the borders. Any illegal immigrant that's crossing has to pay thousands and thousands of dollars. So we're funding a criminal. So we're allowing, illegal immigration is funding criminal organizations that has destroyed Mexico, and I can visit my family back home. It's been many years since I've been in Mexico to visit my family. They took that away from me, but they didn't just take that away from me. They took away from thousands of people here in South Texas, from millions of people here in the United States, from us being able to visit our loved ones. Why would I want that for the American people? I tell the people of South Texas, why haven't you visited your family in Mexico? And they said, because we're scared. I said, exactly. So I don't want what you're scared of to come here.
Right.
Yes, there's good people, amazing children coming for the American dream, right. But we want them to come here the legal way.
Absolutely. As a child, I used to leave our doors open. I mean, not open, unlocked, in Harlingen, whereas they can't do that anymore. My mother has to make sure that she locks every door, every window. It's really sad to see what's going on in the Valley, Myra. But, you are that person that can change and make my dream of turning the Valley red. Myra, we wish you lots of luck.
You.
And as Dinesh said,
thank you so much.
We will do whatever we can to get you through that finish line because we want to see the Valley red and we want to see you succeed and be the Congresswoman that the Valley deserves to have. Thank you again for being with us.
Absolutely. Thank you. God bless you.
God bless you.
It's pretty funny as time goes on, as we get a little bit older, suddenly we notice it's, oh, this doesn't feel as good as it used to. Oh, this is aching over here. That's a pain over there. So these are the aches and pains we attribute to age, but we don't have to just kind of do with them, live with them, because now there's a 100% drug-free solution. You got to try it. It's called Relief Factor. Relief Factor supports your body's fight against inflammation. That's the source of aches and pains. The vast majority of people who try Relief Factor order more because it works for them. Debbie's a fan. She loves using Relief Factor when her shoulders started acting up about a year or so ago. It was the only thing that worked for her, and Debbie knows if she quits taking it, the pain's going to come right back. So she's like, I'm not going to be without this again. You too can benefit. Try it for yourself. You'll see. Order the 3-week quick start for the discounted price of only $19.95. Go to relieffactor.com or call 833-690-7246 to find out more about this offer. That number again, 833-690-7246, or go to relieffactor.com. Feel the difference. We hear a lot about victimhood these days. In fact, victimhood is one of the kind of central themes of one of the major political parties. The whole politics of race, of identity politics, rides on the concept of victimhood. And here's a very interesting study I see it on a website called scipost.com. It's essentially psychological research. It's an article in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. It's written by a whole group of academics, Ekin Oak, Yi Qian, Brendan Stretchek, and Carl Aquino. Anyway, the theme of the article and the study is this. They're looking at people who have a personality that is sometimes associated with what's called a dark triad. A dark triad. What's the dark triad? Well, it's narcissism, it's psychopathological conduct, and it's Machiavellianism. So these are all personality traits. Narcissism, of course, the sense that I am the center of the universe. Psychopathology, or basically pathological. In other words, you have no clear sense of right and wrong. You operate without a clear moral compass. And Machiavellianism, you're very manipulative, and you see the world, including human relations, in terms of power, not in terms of fundamental values or decency. Now, here's the point. They studied these personalities, people who are in this so-called dark triad. And what they found is that these people are extremely good at exploiting victimhood to get what they want. They're not talking specifically about the race context. They're talking about the fact, and we know when we hear about victims, it automatically arouses our sympathy. We go, oh man, that guy was obviously, listen to him, this is a person who obviously had a hard time. Their ancestors had a really hard time. What a life they've led. We need to reach out and help. And what the article is showing and the study is showing is that some very bad people have realized that this is actually a staple part of human nature. By the way, this is not really, in a sense, a psychological breakthrough. I mean, think back to, the novels of Mark Twain, Huckleberry Finn, and others, but also practices that I saw, for example, in India, where a guy who's not blind, nevertheless, wears dark glasses and goes around, as a beggar. And what is he doing? Nothing but manipulating people's sympathy for victimhood. Or the guy who takes one of his legs and ties it up as if he's lame and then hobbles around on crutches. Why? Again, this is a Machiavellian effort to tap into people's idea that, oh my gosh, the guy's lame, let me help him. Obviously, if he was an able-bodied guy who goes, give me 50 rupees, people would be like, get a job. But so these are ways in which victimhood is manipulated. Let me quote from the study because it seems so resonant with the political situation we're dealing with. Quote, "Fortune and human imperfection assure that at some point in life, everyone will experience suffering, disadvantage, or mistreatment. When this happens, the authors of the study say, there will be some who face their burdens in silence." This is the conservative approach, which is, you know what? Life deals me some good cards and some bad cards. My approach to it should be uncomplaining. So there will be some who face their burdens in silence, treating it as a private matter they must work out for themselves. And there will be others who make a public spectacle of their sufferings, label themselves as victims, and demand compensation for their pain. This latter response is what interests us. So the authors here they know exactly what's going on. You're basically describing the entire lifestyles of whole categories of Democrats. These are people who live, you may say, in the bubble of victimhood. The study, by the way, 3,500 people. And they emphasize the issue of Machiavellianism. They say that Machiavellian people have realized, I'm not quoting from the study, they say Machiavellian people are more likely to report that they're not able to pursue their dreams and aspirations, not due to some internal defect or some bogus plan that they developed or some inherent laziness that didn't make them carry out their plan, but rather because of external factors. So in other words, this is victimology all over again. External factors prevented me from being the marvelous success that I would otherwise have become. And they also point out in the study that what these people rely on heavily is virtue signaling. They use the exact phrase. Virtue signaling here is communicated in various ways. One of them is buying products to associate yourself with positive moral characteristics. And as they study these so-called Machiavellians, what the authors realize is that these people are thoroughly dishonest. If you put them in a study and give them an opportunity and say, listen, you can win or lose, but you let them know that they can get away with cheating in the game, they cheat. So these are dishonest people, and they reveal their own dishonesty in the studies themselves. And the other thing that they do is that they are known for taking incidents in their life that are true, but then exaggerating them in such a way that they create this fabricated narrative of one suffering on top of another. In other words, a life now defined by misery and mistreatment, all, of course, externally imposed. I had nothing to do with it. I wasn't just thrown out of 7 jobs because I refused to work. No. I was obviously racially profiled, or it's because I'm a woman. It's because I'm gay, even though I never said so. So there's this constant sense of appealing to victimhood to prey on the goodwill of other people who genuinely want to help real victims. But these people aren't real victims. They're Machiavellians. They're psychopaths. They are people all among us, by the way, and many of them wearing the Democratic label on their sleeve, who use victimhood for cynical, political, and personal gain. The global upheaval caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the crippling sanctions on Russian trade are showing to have massive ripple effects across the world, including right here in the US. And it's not just at the gas pump. Food prices are soaring right now. To quote President Biden, with regards to food shortages, it's gonna be real. Friends, inflation continues to skyrocket as the dollar becomes worth less every day. You need to transition some of your nest egg to something of worth. Gold and silver from Birch Gold. That's right. Birch Gold will help you convert an IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered account in gold and silver. Get started now. Text Dinesh to 989898. With thousands of satisfied customers, an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, Birch Gold can help you protect your savings. Text Dinesh to 989898 to get a free information kit on gold. There's no obligation to get this info. Text Dinesh to 989898 and protect your savings with gold. We're continuing our journey with Dante the Pilgrim through Purgatory. And when I left off last time, Dante and Virgil were accompanied by this guy named Sordello. And what's interesting about this poet, Sordello, he's a Mantuan, same place in Italy as Virgil. But he doesn't know who Virgil is. He's already been pleasantly surprised to find out that he is with a fellow Mantuan, and of course they both embrace. And what's interesting about Sordello is that he sort of hangs around with Dante and Virgil for about 3 cantos. And this is really very different in Purgatory than we saw in Inferno. In Inferno, you're in your circle, Dante interacts with someone, and then he moves on. You don't have any of the sinners in hell basically saying, you know what, Dante, as you move along, I'll kind of hang with you guys. But that is what happens with this guy Sordello. So Purgatory is a very different, it's a more hopeful place. And it's a place where things are, you may say, more, in a sense, more human. Now, as the scene develops with Sordello, Dante actually can't hold back that Virgil is Virgil. So Dante sort of spills the beans, and then Virgil himself says, I'm quoting now, "I am Virgil. The reason I lost heaven was through no other fault than lack of faith." So Virgil is saying, I'm with Dante, but I don't really belong here. I'm going to have to go back to limbo with the other virtuous pagans. I didn't have faith that would have saved me. But interestingly, Sordello is so thrilled to meet Virgil. Virgil is sort of a hero of his. And so it says that then he bent his head, this time reverently. So Sordello had been described as very stately, like Farinata, holding himself to full height. Well, here he goes down. He kind of bows, turned to embrace my master as a vassal does his lord. So here is Sordello basically saying, one poet to another, Virgil, you are the greatest of maybe not poets of all time, but you certainly are the greatest of all poets from Mantua. You are my countrymen, so to speak, who really made it big, and people like me have been in your shadow and in your influence ever since. So Sordello gets a second surprise. Wow, his own mentor, Virgil, is right here. And so there's a second embrace, this time not for the fact that they're both Mantuans, but this time out of this kind of delight that Sordello is meeting his hero. And now in Canto 9, we have Dante giving a vivid description of going through the purgatorial gate. Now, this is the gate separating purgatory, in a sense, from hell, and the presence of the gate serves to emphasize the point that hell is all by itself. Purgatory is a kind of annex to heaven. Once you get through the purgatorial gate, you're saved. You're going to end up in heaven. It doesn't mean your life is going to be easy or your afterlife is going to be easy. As we're going to see, there's suffering in purgatory, and the purgatorial souls are sometimes writhing in pain. And we'll see very soon in the circle of pride, bent over and hobbled because they're carrying heavy weights on top of them. This is sort of Dante's symbol for humility. You are literally physically humbled by being bent over. We'll get to that in a moment. So here's Dante going through the purgatorial gate, and as he goes through this grand gate, famous scene in the Purgatorio, he comes across 3 steps of different colors. And by the way, these steps they symbolize the Christian virtues of faith and hope and charity or love. So the first step is white. Why? Because white is the color of faith. The second step is a kind of hopeful green, representing spring, the first shoots of spring, so hope. And then the third step is red, representing the fire, the flame of love and of charity. So Dante goes through this as an angel with a sword. And then as Dante goes by the angel, and this is a very Dante-esque touch, the angel kind of turns with the sword and writes 7 P's, the letter P, on Dante's forehead. So Dante now has 7 P's on his forehead. P here for peccata or sin. So the idea here is the 7 deadly sins. And remember the 7-story mountain. So climbing the 7-story mountain is, in a sense, purging yourself, not of the sins themselves. You've already been purged of the sins because you are forgiven. Let's remember when we're talking about purgatory, we're not disputing who saves a soul. God does. Jesus does. There's no salvation outside the church. Dante is not saying anything different than that. But Dante is saying that the effects of sin remain with us. If you're a very proud person, you can repent of your pride. But does that stop you from being that way? Does it remove the pride that is somehow, you may almost say, wired now into you? Not necessarily genetically, but let's say as a function of habit over many, many years. So Dante needs to be cleansed of these sins. And so he symbolizes it by the angel literally writing 7 P's on his forehead. And by the way, as he climbs through each of these stories, each of these, as he ascends the 7-story mountain, each of these P's is kind of washed away or drops to the side. And that means that Dante has, in a sense, undergone that purgation and he can now move on. By the way, as he goes through the gate, he's also told, and this is resonant of the Bible, listen, Dante, once you go through here, don't look back. Let's remember that in the Old Testament, when I think, was it Lot's wife in the Old Testament, when she looked back at Sodom and Gomorrah, she was turned into a pillar of salt. Why? Because the looking back suggested longing. Oh, that's the life. I'm going to be leaving it. And there's a part of me that wishes. That's bad. You actually don't want to look back. It's only onward and upward from here. And so Dante is warned, don't look back. And he never does. We're now in Canto 10 of Dante's Purgatory. And he's beginning his ascent up the purgatorial mountain. And in the very first circle here, which is the circle of pride, and what we're talking about here is getting rid of the effects of pride. And this is a very important circle for Dante. In fact, what you'll notice in Purgatory is the scheme here is sort of the opposite of hell. And what I mean is that in hell, the smaller sins, the sins that are, in a sense, less consequential, come first. So we talk first about the sins of incontinence, then we move to more grave sins, the sins of violence, which will include violence, all forms of violence, including taking your own life, including blasphemy, and then we go to the deepest and the deepest sins of deception and treachery and fraud. Here, as we're dealing with sins, we begin with sort of the deadliest sin of all, which is the sin that encompasses the other sins, and that's the sin of pride. Now, it's worth saying a word about pride here for a moment, because when people think of pride in our time, pride is used in so many different ways that it's not obvious why it's a sin at all. Hey, I did a really good job. I'm very proud of my performance in this race. So I did very well on my examination. I'm very proud. Yes, son, I'm very proud of you. You did a great job. So this is not the type of pride that we're talking about here. What we're talking about is people who develop a sense of themselves that is completely out of proportion, not only with who they are, but with who human beings are. So here we think about pride as, in a sense, inflating your position in the universe, beginning to think that the universe revolves around you, creating, if you will, an idol of yourself, IDOL, an idol of yourself. This idolatry, this self-idolatry is the essence of pride. And let's remember that pride is particularly, people are particularly susceptible to pride who are very capable, who have great accomplishments, because they're likely to say with Muhammad Ali, I am the greatest. And it's very easy to go from I'm the greatest boxer to I'm just the greatest human being on the planet. And why isn't everybody else bowing toward me? And in a sense, why isn't even God recognizing that with me, he did a better job than he did with everyone else? So this overweening, destructive, and this is the pride that God is concerned about. And it's a pride that Dante himself is vulnerable to. Why? Because both in the poetical sphere as well as in the political sphere, these are the two spheres that are constantly discussed in the Divine Comedy in all three books, from the Inferno all the way to the Paradiso. Dante is actually very talented in both areas. Let's remember that in 1300, the year in which the poem is located, Dante is an elected leader in Florence. He's running the city along with a small group of other people who are part of this kind of inner council of just a few Florentines making all the decisions for the city. Now, Dante later will be pushed into exile when his faction, the White Guelphs, loses. But Dante, at the date of the poem, doesn't know that. His political career is, you may say, at its summit. So he has every reason to feel proud. And similarly, Dante is unmatched, I would say even unmatched by Milton, in his ability to create images and the use of language. Now, we don't get the full scope of that because we're not reading Dante in the original, but Dante is vulnerable to pride, and he knows that. This is a very important part of the Purgatory for him. So he gets into Purgatory, and very interestingly, at the beginning, he doesn't see anybody. He doesn't see any souls. All he sees are some sculptures. So what he sees, in effect, and think about it, how cool this is. Here's Dante, who's a poet. He's an artist. And what does he see in Purgatory right here but works of art, which naturally interest him? This is sort of his stock in trade. And so, but he looks around looking for souls, and he doesn't see souls. Now, it'll turn out very soon that the reason he doesn't see souls is that the souls are all bent over. They're bent over like a 95-year-old woman. They're bent over. Why? Because on their backs are heavy weights, and they're carrying stones. And here's Dante's image of how you have to cure pride. How do you cure pride? Well, by taking proud people and humbling them. And how do you humble them? There's no better way than having them bent over, carrying a weight, and looking not up at the sky. Think of Farinata, arrogant. They say, Dante says, standing erect, disdaining hell, and contrast him with these souls who are bent over and looking actually at the ground. And what are they carrying? Dante says they're carrying little pieces of stone that are actually used to make a sculpture. And think of what an exquisite image this is, because what Dante is really saying is that he wants us to think of our own lives as a work of art. And he wants us to think of art not simply that we create, the way that we use sculpture in a sense to make our own lives into works of art, but he wants us to let us be sculpted by the divine sculptor. And that's what's going on right here in Purgatory, in the circle of pride. These souls are being re-sculpted out of their pride, you might say, being taught the lesson of humility. And Dante sees two remarkable sculptures. I just want to read a line about how these sculptures are. They are, as Dante describes them, very lifelike. He says, there appeared before our eyes a shape alive, carved in an attitude of marble grace, an effigy that could have spoken words. one that would have sworn that he was saying Ave, meaning Ave Maria. So you have the sculpture, and the sculpture's mouth is almost moving. And now in a human sculpture, if you want to say the words Ave, you have to write them on the sculpture. But this is Purgatory. This is actually the architecture of God himself. And the sculpture is so lifelike that you can actually see, you can actually hear the words Ave coming out of the sculpture. The sculpture is so lifelike that in effect, it's speaking. So Dante is here talking about the way in which good art mirrors life, but not only mirrors life, but what good art does is it ultimately educates life. It elevates life. It helps us to learn from art. And one of the purposes for Dante of art is never for art's sake. Art always has a moral component. So it has an aesthetic component, but the moral component is that art should make people better.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.